Hello and welcome. You're viewing the Citizens Journalist podcast, Mesa County Compass, that brings you the news that you can use from a different point of view. I'm Ruth.
I'm Lisa.
And together we are Mesa County Compass. Our goal is to create an informed, current, active citizenry armed with the facts. We will be covering what's new to you, what it means to you, what you can do about it, and provide you access to the decision makers when we can. Welcome to Mesa County Compass this afternoon. We have Keith Ehlers, who is actually a member at this time of our Planning Commission, our City Planning Commission, and he's also an entrepreneur here in the Valley. Welcome, Keith.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah. Give us a little bit of what you are all about. You've been on before, but it's been a while, so if you would, please.
Yeah, that's fair. Like you mentioned, I've started some businesses here in the Valley, and I've kind of been in the realm of land planning for a long time, and that's evolved into, with land development, then shifts into sometimes business development and things of that nature. And through those ventures, you kind of really get exposed to some of the hurdles, some of the pathways that are least resistant, and as I encountered those, it made it an easy step to start wanting to step into roles like planning commission and being on some different advisory committees for policy development and codes, and currently on the housing affordability task force. And then I attend the events. I try to, whether they be the AMGDs or the housing and some of the the seminars that the city puts on as well.
Right.
And the reason for that is just really trying to understand more about what is going on. There's so much going on there's so many times where you just kind of go, oh, wow, I'm glad that some of that's getting some effort. And at the same time, it really helps in our development or policy development conversations to at least raise flags to say, hey, we might be working in silos here, right? Or are there unintended consequences? Or how do we know if a good effort maybe went too far? And then how do you start the conversation
It's
on
a balancing act at that point.
At the risk of sounding cliche with the word balance, right? I mean, it's exactly right. It gets overused, and what balance? Going for the balance when it comes to actually making the sausage anymore.
Right.
Gosh, we have chose the wrong forums. We have chose the wrong methods. We have chose the wrong messaging. I used wrong.
Yeah.
If our intentions are for it to really be anything other than divisive, right? The way we've gone about things recently, without intention, has created divisiveness. And then I think on both sides, kind of noticing it, it's just created this, what is balance? Well,
It depends on who's looking at it.
I want to give anything up because then it'll swing too far the other way. And I'll be honest with you, in the various roles that I play, what I see there sometimes is just that very human element of sometimes people are dug in out of fear, right? And I think I am comfortable saying that some of that fear sometimes is that there is so much going on right now. So many pieces to the puzzle getting moved around and shifted that I'm terrified to give any movement on something that I can be really helpful with, because I don't know how all these other pieces start to plug in and move in. And what's cool about that, right? It sounds very
nebulous.
I really started off as like negative. What's wrong? And scared and feared. But what's cool about this process, from the lens that I have, is that we've kind of moved through that, and now I really do feel like there is enough people on both sides kind of going, okay, yeah, like there was a lot of pieces moving, and there were some unintended consequences. And I really think things would be different if we had that magic wand for many of those decision makers to, or participants, myself included, to go back and shift how something was approached in light of knowing what you know now, right?
Yeah.
But
That's a redo.
it's a redo, right? But what the other thing that is that there's a willingness to identify those areas now that maybe didn't go as well or created more divisiveness than was necessary, right? Kind of a net
Or
loss
people
instead of
were
a net
afraid
gain.
to approach because of.
Got it.
Okay, I'm going to stop him because
All right.
you're being nebulous. So we need, I mean, you're very good at being nebulous, but
Got to stick with what you're good at, you know?
when you're saying that, what are some of the things that you feel like have been determined that, hey, that's not meeting the goal? And I would think that the two goals were to plan a community that's affordable for everyone and to reduce rules and regulations and policies that shouldn't be in there so that you can limit some of the costs and some of the delays that help make it more affordable or less affordable. Maybe I'm wrong. So
Yeah.
where have you seen things addressed? Give us a couple of examples where things are getting better, and what has changed that wasn't going the right direction that you've seen change
Yeah.
specifically.
You bet. Like in my role at the time on the code update committee, as well as then participating pretty heavily with the comp plan creations and whatnot, kind of seeing how it starts with the comp plan, then goes into some adopted policies, right? Think bike and ped plan, sustainability plan,
Right.
you know, all of these kinds of plans that they don't have teeth, but they get linked in to say we want to reflect this, and so then they inherently have teeth. And then going into the actual code element, all of that gets done, right? And the important part is it then gets codified in the code before anybody figures out who pays for it. And so now, when it comes down to who pays for it, we have to do it. It's a well, the city goes, well, it costs this much. And now what are our options? Because the city doesn't generate revenue. They're not designed to be a revenue generator, right?
You can only beat the slave so hard. No, I'm just kidding.
And so, you know, that starts to shift on to anything that can be associated to those things. And in my realm, that is the housing providers. Right, and so what that process does, and whether I've inferred a sentiment in how I've described that process or not, back out and say, with that process being what it is, who is going to pay for it, and then at the end, if it goes to the housing providers, you now go all the way back up to the comp plan where you have 9 or 12 principles. I should know this. And you start to realize that right at that beginning document, there are competing interests, right? How do you have really grand and wide open, you know, tree canopy, open space, parks, visual amenities, large bike paths, large walking paths, along with bike lanes, along with and housing affordability, which was another principle. Right? Look, neither of those is wrong. And they're all something that if you ask us individually, hey, is this a good thing? We'd all raise our hand and go, I love trees. I would love wide open sidewalks, right? We just didn't ask, you know, how much did it cost? Now, moving past that, because you asked the question of what are some things that are really happening now. Let's start with what I think is some really good things, right? As the on the housing affordability task force, they kind of came together and said, hey, let's identify some, we'll call them low-hanging fruit, right? Some very specific pieces of code that are adding burden costs or affecting the cost of housing, right? Now the challenge is how do you articulate those exact savings? And that's part of the resolution that created that task force was you need to create some metrics.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And those metrics can be challenging because you have, well, it's very different for a small, 7, 8 lot subdivision near town versus a 62 unit apartment complex versus a
Right. Everything has its own
it does.
set value.
But you can
costs,
still
really.
you can capture how it changes, right? The time that it takes to get through a process, right? The financing and how much those expenses are. So you can identify them. It's really hard to kind of quantify them. But so some of these things were just right off the bat, look, you know that this is either adding time, it's creating process, it's creating unpredictability, and it's hindering the ability to get these things out to market. And so we collected this list, and then it was okay. Let's start picking away at these things. As we were picking away at these things, and then I came back on Planning Commission here recently and started seeing it from the city staff side as well, and it was holy cow! Whoa! There's some things on this list that are on this list. So it was a really cool aha moment to recognize that there wasn't this two sides.
It wasn't
these
the huge
sides weren't-
divide.
Yeah, they weren't adversarial. They weren't ignoring one another, kind of thing. How we go about getting there and doing it is part of the process and needs to be fleshed out. Of course, and the word balance comes in.
Right.
But I think that's really telling that the one thing that they did do well in the code update and others is say things like, look, this code is meant to be dynamic. It's meant to be fluid and adjusted as we go. And so for this stage, there's been some really good elements where I don't see anybody kind of getting in there and turning it up and creating less balance.
Right.
Every effort is at least a movement towards better balance. And I think mostly the questions are, is that really balance, or is that just kind of coming off a little bit, or how do we get it
Well,
done?
Are we making real gains?
Yeah, that's-
Are we making-
Because if the people that are purchasing and the builders that are building don't see the changes as being, they may say, oh, good, you guys did that. However, it costs $5 less now that you've made that change and you've spent some time. So are we seeing that the changes that have been made are going to significantly change the cost?
Great question. So this is where I feel compelled to say, look, again, I am not here as my role on Planning Commission
Right.
or with the affordability task force. I'm here as I'm interested in this community, and that's why I
Serve
try to
on
play
that.
so many roles, is to get different perspectives and not get ingrained into just one, right? And so from there, I'm comfortable saying, look, the hardest part is it is death by 1,000 cuts out there right now. If you look for the one thing that can make the big change, right? Anytime, since 2000, when I first started really participating in the city's stuff and in land planning, the first focus group I was on was a Mesa County land use focus group, and the first thing they stepped into, and they said, we gotta figure out something about our code. How can we make sure housing is working and yada yada? It was, we got to look at the process. How can we make the process shorter? That has been step one, comment one on every single effort to sit down and revisit policy.
I can understand that because sometimes it takes up to 2 years to get something
Yeah,
moving.
yeah,
And you can't
there's
have
money.
that.
yeah,
Time is
Especially
money.
not if you're the small developer
yeah.
or an individual.
Yeah.
You're spot on. And in 25 years, 26 years now, we haven't really knocked that thing down a whole lot. And it's because in my opinion, it's because when you get into it, there isn't this one thing. There isn't this one thing.
Right.
And I think we've all moved through, I think many of us have, I know I have, moved through this, well, what is, if you got to go out there and really champion one thing, what could it be? And you know, I was wrong in some of these, but this is just kind of my process, right? I went through the various times where I went, well, one of these things we gotta adjust is the realtor fees, right? And then it was, you know, is it regulations? And then it was, is it the timing? And then it was, well, what's happening with our land prices and how they're being assessed and whatnot? And look, at each one of those, I was convinced that was a big thing. And then the reason I'm able to shift off of them is having conversations similar to this, or in the various roles, you start to really flesh out and see, okay, what's happening out there? And there are places to improve each one of those, right? But they weren't it.
Yeah.
And the process is a great example of it, right? I'll get off course here and tell you where I'm at right now, but if I had a magic wand to say how can we bring affordable housing back into to reality, we would somehow bring the consumer, the people buying the homes, into a reality check. We did the coolest exercise out of all the things that I've been a part of. A lot of these groups and committees, they come together in the beginning, and it's well, let's introduce everybody. And you say your name, and you say kind of what you do, a little bit about your background, and why you felt compelled to participate. And they did one where they said, let's just go with, tell us your name, and then tell us about the first home you bought. If you wouldn't mind telling us how much you paid for it, and then tell us about the home. These homes were horror stories across the board. It was, well, you know, it's when I was growing up, I bought this old place in Boulder, and it was, you know, one bedroom and these narrow stairways, and it was falling apart, and it was this, and you'd go through this whole group. Not one of them said, oh, my first home?
Was it
3-car garage, granite countertops, columns coming out over an entry foyer, vaulted ceilings, crown molding, beautiful flooring, the tub. Oh, you should have seen the tub. You know, it would not a single one of them were that.
right?
You know, and so when we look at it now, one of the hardest parts I'm having in these affordable housing conversations is there are contractors we can point you to right now that'll build you a 2-bedroom home, 1.5 bath, you know, kitchen, laundry room, and then even a little garage on it,
Perfect
single
start
story,
home.
right, for $145,000 to $155,000,
And then-
not including the land,
Right.
but all in.
Right.
Well, gee, why aren't we seeing those? We are seeing them in some places, but you can't. When they go out and they put those on market, they're not moving. They're not as attractive. And now I got to be honest. I don't know if that's to say that they absolutely wouldn't sell if you created a whole subdivision right of them or put a marketing.
It makes you wonder then the contrast between apartments and those little houses. Why would somebody prefer
Choose to
an
rent.
apartment to choose that rather than one of the smaller homes that was actually physically theirs? Interesting scenario.
It really is, right? And so I can identify these observations. I don't know that I have the answer and solution why, but so I've kind of taken a long way around to get into it. So we're back to this. What are we seeing? Look, there are code amendments. I mean, just the other night at Planning Commission, staff brought a bundle of 9 that we moved through. Right? I think we pulled one or two out to just get a little bit more looked at, and then the task force had 2 others on there, and they're moving through. So these things are happening, and it will be interesting to understand when will we hear the builders in that community come in and say, hey, look, these prices are going down. It's very interesting because some of them apply to multifamily, some of them apply to single family, some of them will help the land developers creating the lots. Others might more facilitate the builders and that marketability. And so trying to get that census response, that's really tough to see that metric. The other hard part is that at the same time that's happening, we're getting these costs ticked up on the other end,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And one of the really interesting pieces bringing the city and housing providing community, when I say housing providing, I'm talking about the nonprofits, the for-profits, the multifamily, the single family.
Just the whole gamut.
The whole gamut. That's bringing them really together is there are times when these state things are coming through that one of the things that has shifted more recently, and I really have to acknowledge, members of like HBA and WCC and even the realtors and whatnot that are really starting to put some time and energy into not only raising questions, but then going through the processes to find out. And so one of the things that's been able to do, even if it's coming to some of the advisory committees and groups that can then help funnel it in, is we've been able to go back to city legal and say, wait a minute, like,
Do we have to do this?
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
You said that we had to do this because the state said so. And there's been a number of occasions here recently where we go in and revisit what the state said we had to do, only to find out, no, they didn't. Now, in some cases, it was easier to employ or deploy the regulation to put the burden on the housing provider than it was for the city to take on that responsibility. But in most cases, it was sort of I won't say in most, but in some cases, it was okay, the state said you had to do this, and then kind of like you have that unfunded mandate deal, right? Well, unfunded can also be an enforcement thing as well, and how does it really get into the fabric of our regulations and how we're doing things? Well, you might say you have to do this at a full extent, but other communities are not doing it at that full extent, and there is the intention is there, and if you can capture most of that and address the intent of the concern, you're good. And I might be stumbling over how to explain it, but it's similar to how we did the impact fees, right? Under the last council, and with those consultants that we chose to get involved that continue to kind of defend their position, everything that was done to provide the maximum justifiable implementation of creating that nexus or that connection between housing development and the impacts on the infrastructure, right? The maximum justifiable.
Right. Before it would be a lawsuit because it was a tax.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so while those two things are not related, right, you start to see a theme, and by seeing a theme, we start to see areas where we can go, hey, those are places we can look for improvements, and we are. And when I say we, it's not just housing community, it's not just those with a primary focus on housing affordability. It's staff as well seems to be more willing as the efforts of the community that's come together and started to organize thoughts and do more than just the fire and forget messaging. Hey, I think we should do something. I wrote my email, right? I wrote my letter to the editor. They stay engaged and they stay part of the conversation. And by doing that, it's relieving the burden on staff to just accept a complaint and then have to figure out how to deal with it. They're really participating in
So they're
getting
providing
it done.
solutions, or this is done in this community, and it may help you to not have to look through so much. Because I'm thinking, if you're doing all of these and you get to one or two a meeting, because everything takes time, it takes forever to get through. It takes 4 years, and you've just gotten through 20 little I'm exaggerating, but to get through all the regs, if other people are looking at it and saying, I'm questioning this, and they can bring it to your attention and show you where it is and why they have a concern, I would think that community involvement would help.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, right? This is off memory, and so I'd be a wiser man, wouldn't use a number at all. But staff came in and gave a presentation that had a list of contemplated code changes that were kind of, these are the things we want to get to. And some on that list were not the actual code, we're going to change this. It was we got to look at this. We think it's creating some hardship that It isn't that. We think we can achieve our goals better, right? Golly, if that list was less than 30 items long, no way, right? It really it was a long list. The Housing Affordability Task Force has that too. Now, while some of them overlap, we got here because at each step of the way, and it was really frustrating during the impact fee discussion, really frustrating during the code amendment under the last city council where, there was this desire for an amenity, right? A public facing, I don't want to use amenity because I've used that in the past and that's been kind of triggering for some. So it's a public facing asset. Right?
Okay.
Maybe it's a bike lane, maybe it's more landscaping, whatever it is.
Whatever
right?
it turns
It
out.
would make it more attractive, or it would make it something that was more,
It'd be more desirable.
desirable.
Yeah,
There's
that's
the
the word.
word.
And the question is
Can we afford the desirable?
exactly,
Or
Or-
what can we afford?
who wants to pay for it?
Yes, that would be the biggest
Right.
one.
And so as we did these things, it was if we had this much more sidewalk across the lot, then it equals this. So if the number was $2,500, the response from the council at the time was, well, $2,500 doesn't seem like that much, right? So that's how we get there. And that's happened over time. And this is I'm not saying anything new, right? I'm sure everybody's nodding along. But the point is, we got here and look at all these expenses, and now take a list of 30 plus another list. And they're not all $2,500 costing things. But when you start adding them up,
It's
heck,
huge.
yeah, you're going to see that.
It's huge.
Now, that's before we even move into a phase that starts talking about, okay, where are we seeing an out of balance in how we went from a comp plan, great ideas, into a adopted policy? Here's how we would implement those if we were really trying to go after them. And then into the codification. If we go back into some of those and start saying, okay, by saying this up here, we now see, we can look at it now, that it's filtering through in this way, and that is a little bit more than was intended, right? Either by unintended consequence or by it was intended, but others felt that was okay. And as we start to tighten our fiscal belts, and as current councils and strategic plans start to look at, core services and those sorts of things,
Right.
where can we tighten those things up? And
So do you notice with everybody starting to come together, those things are starting to happen? Like you're trying to get the costs down and everybody's putting their 2 cents worth in and they're coming up with the solutions.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's-
Now, here's a really fascinating one. Just at Planning Commission the other night, there was a discussion about bike storage on properties, and whether they be the commercial properties or multifamily properties. Recent changes to the code had put in a requirement. You have not only your, we'll call it short-term bike park, which is your normal bike racks, right? But then also long-term bike rack parking. And this is a really interesting, I would advise you to go back and listen to the hearing on that. You're going to fast forward through the first few hours to get to this, but
First few
it
hours.
was, we were there till 10:30.
Oh, Joe.
But it was it was really fascinating to see, okay, the long-term bike park, it's premised around, look, in order to ride bikes and really make that a form of transportation, how do we now address the securing that bike and having
Storage of that bike.
storage and is it covered from weather and those sorts of things? Well, it started flowing into two things, right? One was to what extent is a private property owner required to create covered and secure storage of anybody else's asset,
Right, exactly.
and then the other one was the ratio, how many you had to put in there. So look, from where we've been in recent years into now looking at that has historically been nobody's moving,
right,
right?
exactly.
And it for their reasons.
Right.
What fleshed out even within the Planning Commission, let alone throughout the hearing there, really really excited me, really kind of re-injuvenated me in some regards, because there were sides going, we got to find the balance. So much so that there was agreement that an adjustment was appropriate. Agreement that, so now, and then it didn't even get into the, what would that adjustment be? The sticking point came into a, well, do we strike this from the code right now? If we agree that this isn't, that this could use improvement, do we strike it from the code because we have testimony showing that this is really causing problems and adding expense that is not being warranted and used right now, while we then go back and figure out a more appropriate balance? Or do we leave it in? Do we leave the burden in? And that's great, right? Because what that is that's now the remnants of that conversation of, right? Because both, I know I was on the side of we should strike it, but a very valid and reasonable other side of saying let's leave it in there is, look, they don't want to strike it and then it doesn't get revisited. Well, I don't want to leave it in there and have it burdening until this process goes through again, because it's historically been so painful and so long. But if that's the remnant of the divisiveness that has been here the last 3, 4, 5 years, that's good news, right? That is starting to say, okay, this is open for conversation about balance. Now we just got to figure out what do we do.
Well, and kind of about freedom. If I'm a builder, I question why the city should be able to require me or a policy to create something, whether it's an EV charging station or whatever. It's my property, and if I think that will attract the buyers that I want, I can put it in and say, this will give me an advantage over others. But if I say, I want to make this so it's the most affordable, and by cutting this, I can save money and pass that on to the consumer, I think that as a builder, I would want that ability.
Yeah. And if the private property owner, being the builder, the developer, whomever, if they are to be obligated to consume their space and their resources to provide what is a feature that is not, they aren't targeting it for their users.
It's an amenity.
It's a feature that has been, there are those who think
Fostered
that
on
is a
them.
good community element, right? I don't know that I disagree, right? In the right scenario.
But
That-
to make
so I'm
you
a-
do that.
Exactly. And to not only make you do it, but to make you pay for it.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, here's what was really compelling as we're on this topic. And I don't want to get too much into like my opinions on it. I share your sentiment in what that private property right is versus the community element, and how do we get that appropriately allocated. But in the hearing there just the other night, the Affordability Task Force asked recent developers of the multifamily, right? And so we had 3 different testimonies, and I think they accounted, one of them accounted for over 530 units that have been brought on. And so we touched on, I think they gave some information on 6 or 7 different multifamily facilities. And what they were saying was, take the rail yard, and boy, I hope I don't put words in somebody else's mouth here, but the rail yard down by Walmart, that multifamily. So in that, they built an entire building, fully enclosed, roofed, locked door, security cameras, bike racks inside, the works, for their tenants, for their users. They had put, I think he said they had put 40, either 40 or 20. Doesn't matter. Nothing. Nobody used it. I think he said at one point they had 3 users in there. So much so that when they built their next project, I think it was called the Slate, and this is all on the recording, so you can get the actual numbers with them. They built another enclosed facility, and they said, well, let's just take half of those bike racks in there and use them over there rather than buy new ones and whatnot. And they had them over there. No use. Then it was then there was conversation, and not just those 2, but now all of the others, and the 2 other developers, a total of 3 that was on there. They talked about how, I'll be honest, we initially started off saying that we would we would rent these spaces out, $25 a month,
Right.
$50 a month. Well, they went from 50, no users, 25, no users, 0. They offered it for free,
No users.
no users.
Oh,
right?
my word.
Let me back up. No users isn't fair. 1, 2, 3 kind
Minimum.
of users.
Minimum.
It wasn't 5, 10, 15, right? So what we really started to see was, again, now you have this imposing of a requirement to put these things on here, and we're getting real world user
Data.
feedback that they aren't using them. Not just because they might have to pay for them. It's not about access to
They
it.
just don't want them.
Even when it's free. Goose egg. Now, a counter to that that I think warrants saying is that some of these things are going up in great areas, but they may not also be great areas where the roads getting around them are already bike friendly, right? I would say that they're bike friendly, but they definitely aren't. Let me back that up. I would say that they're commuter bike friendly, people that are using it to get to work and whatnot, and for those purposes it was stated we have to provide these. They aren't in those areas where I'm watching the ball game on the couch on Sunday with a nice cold beer, and the kids want to run down to the whatever shop, and I go, yeah, just ride your bikes. I don't send my kids down those. Commuter, yeah. My kids, no. So that's a very valid point. Of
But
not,
if we look back at the statistic that they just did, and not being on bikes, because it sounds like that's my thing, but it's not. It was 2.3% of the people in Grand Junction actually used bikes to commute, because for the most part, bikes are not good for long distances. They're not good for getting to work. I mean, even Trent Prawl said, well, on days I have meetings, I don't ride my bike because I don't want to get all sweaty. I mean, it's just not practical. You're not taking family outings to work or to the dentist. Or the car is still the primary form. And so, again, it slates that. And before, when I was in college, you just parked your bike in your apartment. I mean, yeah.
that was the other commentary that these testimonies really gave. Now look, like you said, we're not getting on bikes because I'm not
No,
trying to
no,
rehash
no,
the debate
no,
about
no.
are bikes good or bad, but
Exactly.
that's the essence, and this is the positive thing about it. We're finally, we're on the precipice. We're not there yet, but I see the ability to have conversation now that doesn't set up on the pretense that you're either for bikes or you're against bikes. We can now
Working
go,
in the middle.
to what extent do we have to do this right now? And are there ways that we can assure that should that demand rise in the
Yes.
future as other infrastructure comes in, that there's an ability to accommodate that? You betcha.
But I
right?
think that is letting the market drive too. If you let the market drive the demand, you wouldn't have this problem in the first place. If you had people saying, I really want this in my place and I'm willing to pay for it, and then you would meet the demand. But to me, oftentimes it's more of a vision that somebody outside has, like a government, that this would be good for the community as opposed to what the community itself is driving through what they're purchasing.
It looks to me like that's been an issue on several things.
And this is nothing against the Planning Commission or you, but it just seems to me like on many issues, we're requiring this. If it's not for basic safety in codes and things, I would say anything that you want is an upgrade and you choose it and you pay for it.
Well, you're spot on, right? And I think this is an important message for some reason to think that good things are coming, right? And that's that in the same vein that I talked about before. It's like, what is the question? Do you take it out of the code while we talk about it, or do you leave it in? Well, back when these codes were getting implemented, between the scheduling and the budgets for the consultants that were writing it, you had a short amount of time.
Right.
And then there was this huge complexity of trying to stuff it all in. And you only, some of these advisory groups or stakeholder groups or anything in between, they can only meet once a month, twice a month.
Right.
And then you got to kind of incorporate. Next thing you know, it was we got to get it going, got to get it going, got to get it going. Well, at the time, it was very offensive to folks with maybe views like mine, because they were just shoving all of this other stuff in without that contemplation of who pays for it.
Throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Well, yeah.
And do we have
old
to
scenarios.
Oftentimes it was, do we have to do it right now? Why? What is the rush?
But this is the optimism.
Yes.
Is because, that was their mode, right? In the same way that I'm pressing the other night to say, let's carve it out so it's not a burden, and then we can work on a better solution. I can very much see how they're going, let's get it in, and then we can adjust it.
Tweak it from there.
You know what? So those of us that were kind of really frustrated, now is a time that I can reflect on that and kind of go, all right, like, I don't like it. It's not the way it should be. But knowing that there were humans behind it, like, that's a reasonable human, maneuver,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
It's just our nature.
it would be what I would do.
Yeah, right. And so now we're in this really healthy part of there is a willingness, and I got to tell you, the bringing on of the current council and them laying out the strategic plan in the way they did, and starting to create some hierarchy and priorities of those principles in the comp plan to make it to where when we have these competing interests, what are we trying to focus on now? And then with Mike Bennett and Kimberly Bullen coming on, I mean, they are just facilitating conversation and openness and whatnot, that it's fostering good things. Now, make no mistake about it, right? The culture within, and I might say the culture within staff, and then even kind of the hardened shell of stakeholders or whatnot on any side of any topic,
Exactly.
right? It's taken a little bit to kind of soften and not feel uncomfortably vulnerable, right? But it's happening. And that's healthy. That's good. And maybe I'm being nebulous in this, but I got to tell you, I just feel like this shift in communication is so much, it should be celebrated as much as any metric that says, what is getting done? When will we see this housing get there?
Well, it's something that took a while to get to, so you have to take a while to back it out.
Yeah.
So it's you're at that balancing point.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
I hate that word, but it's the only word that really applies.
Well, no, and it's complex, right?
Yes.
Because it's that comp plan, adopted plans, code, who pays for it, and then enforcement.
Right,
right?
right.
Oh, and then we don't even know if any of that's good. We can have opinions on whether it's good, bad, or ugly, but we don't know if it's really impacting us until the next step, which is how did it get built and what happened?
Right.
And there's challenges there. So,
And
So-
how much time of yours would you say that it takes between the two committees? And because you said you were there till 10:30, I don't know. And
yeah, it's really. I hate that you asked me that question, because if I answer you truthfully, it probably makes a lot of people turn their heads and go, well, I can't do that. I don't want to do that, because it can be a lot of work. I choose it. I think it's important. I got on the Planning Commission in the very beginning because I was representing developers as a land planner, and I would sit and present these things, and I would see these decision makers on Planning Commission or at council at the time using words like, well, I think, and I feel.
yeah,
And that's,
feelings are really important.
and that's not their role, right?
yeah.
So I could bitch and I could moan and I could pound and be angry about it, or I could step into it. I could participate in it. And so I chose to. And now it's kind of the same thing when I hear so many of the generations just before me, my current friends, family, like there are times where it is kids are graduating from high school and what are they going to do? Well, I don't know, but they can't stay here because they can't afford a house
Right.
and they don't want to live with mom. Think
And
about
Mom
that.
doesn't want him to live
I
with
don't
him.
know, but they can't stay here. Look, it's real, and
It
you know,
is.
I've got close relationships with like the Glenwood Springs and Roaring Fork Valley area, and that has been happening now for a couple of decades.
Yes.
where
Yes,
you
it
just
has.
even the ranchers, right? You can't keep selling parts of your farm. You lose the ability to subdivide little chunks off anymore, and so that next generation can't man. They have to leave. And so now they have a young people problem. They have a workforce problem. Our school enrollments are declining, and then that's by a lot of things. Shouldn't have drugged that into this, but the point is, so I look at my kiddos, and I want to be able to look back and say that I didn't leave you hanging. I might not have solved your problem. You're gonna have to actually go to work and figure out how to create resource in order to get what you want.
Right.
But if I can facilitate that being a little bit more in reach by staving off the unfunded, I really want this to look good without talking about how do we pay for it effectively, then that keeps it meaningful, So, I mean, every other week there's a day, or at least a half a day of meetings, because I'm also sitting on right now the Mesa County code update, their land use code update, and an advisory committee for the TEDS, the Transportation Engineering Design Standards. Meanwhile, there are others who are doing some of these as well, and they're also on like the stormwater management update that's happening, and so there's a lot of this stuff that's now evolving.
A lot of working pieces.
A lot of working pieces.
Right.
And what's really great about it, and I would ask anyone out there to participate more, and it doesn't matter if it's showing up as a warm body. You get 3 minutes at council or planning commission. Those 3 minutes, they're important. They're perspective. I get to see that more than most I encounter because of the various roles I'm on, and it's invaluable. Not only invaluable to understand where people are at, but I'm then able to more so share fact. Right? And really say, this is what's going on over here, and start to let people put pieces together, and all of
Well, you
these
can
things
also diffuse a lot of situations because you know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
And
not let
that's-
something, grow artificially.
Snowball.
Right.
Because it happens so easily.
Yeah.
So what would you say, this, I always come back to this, because the websites and everything, and there's just so much going on, how would you tell people to get involved? I know it's 3 minutes, but you need to know what's going on to be able to do those 3 minutes and where they are in the process and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that they're giving things that are pertinent and not just ranting.
Yeah. Great question. A great source, and I've been blown away. One of the surprises has been, again, because of the different roles, when I get the agendas for upcoming meetings, planning commission hearings, planning commission workshops, city council workshops, whatever it is, right? The various different groups that meet out there, and the stakeholder groups, I get these agendas, and I'm able to kind of go, I've heard people talking about this thing, and I can then share it with people to say, hey, just so you know, interested or not, this is being discussed at an upcoming meeting. That's one thing. The even better thing is to do it yourself. Go on to the city's website. I mean, the agenda, the agendas for the workshops give you a heads up, like a 2-week advance of what's going to be happening at a hearing, because they issue the workshop agenda a week before the workshop, and they have the workshop, and then the agenda item, usually not all, but most of those then go to that next hearing. So if you just look at the agendas, or if those were more frequently circulated, you can look on there and go, don't care. That's meaningful to me. Or
I know somebody that would
starts,
be meaningful.
Right?
Yeah.
It's that death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing, where if you just keep seeing that this is trying to be passed, and this is trying to be passed, and this is trying to be passed, and you're going, and the first 3 I just cruised right by, but now there's 8 of them. Like, that's changing the cost of housing.
Right.
Now you can choose which ones you wanna ask more questions about, and then you can show up, right? The other thing that is invaluable is the process to date has been right, comp plan, dot plan, but somewhere in there we hire, the city hires consultants. The city does the legal interpretation, and both of those two things are singular, isolated, and they somehow come with a level of authority that what they say is it,
Right.
that it is influencing everything. The data that was provided to support some of the TEDS changes or the impact fees.
Impact fees.
It's
yeah.
like you start at this base data of, well, this is how many people use this and whatnot, or this is the cost of housing or the cost of this. And so now we have to take the cost divided by the number of people, and that's how we get your fee, right? Well, when you go back and you look at that initial data, you go, how the heck did you get to this number?
Right.
I bring it up because it happens in everywhere. If the city is left to be the only legal interpretation, which is also shown to be just as prone to error as the rest of us
Right.
humans, right? And then you just take a consultant's data solidly, and then the consultant's interpretation of that data, because what happens is they say, we want to do a project to update this. Then the staff creates an RFP,
And you might tell them what an RFP is.
request for proposal, saying here's the scope of work. So yeah, the staff creates the scope, and I'm open to being corrected if anybody watching thinks that I'm missing a glaring thing, but I think I've got the gist of it here, pretty confident. They create the scope, the consultants propose, one of them gets selected, and then they go and create their foundation of data, right? The first scope is kind of that existing conditions usually,
Yes.
and then they do that. And all of that is done before they engage any stakeholders, before any public input. No public input on the scope from stakeholders or otherwise.
Yeah, that has been an issue.
Yeah. No public input on which data we are saying is gospel,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
So when we start there. So I tell all that to give the basis of what more of the stakeholders are starting to do is really trying to say, look, let's stop just fighting for the sake of saying no and not being able to get into the weeds effectively. And instead, let's provide alternatives. And so being able to have a fund that can hire a different attorney to do legal interpretation. Now it offers a alternative or a counterpoint or a complementary point to staff's or city's legal. Whereas before, no checks and
No
balances.
checks and balances.
And
I
the
like
only
that
reason
idea.
there's not any checks and balances is because it's unfunded, right?
Exactly.
And the same thing for consultants, right? There, you can look at consultants that aren't all based out of Boulder, and it's amazing how they would take even the same data or the same scope and start to derive other alternatives. And again, which one is right or wrong? I won't get into that. I'll look at it through my lens and
That's
decide.
for
there's a
everybody to
preference.
sit down at the table and hash out.
So,
Wouldn't it be great if we had
Yeah.
alternatives?
so one of my questions is before, not necessarily now. So when a scope was decided, who decided we needed the scope in the first place?
The council usually directed we needed the scope in the first place, but
Okay.
they didn't direct the scope. They said we need to do a project to update the bike and ped plan.
Okay, so we need to do that. And then they sent it to city staff and said, okay, develop a scope for us, and then and then city staff sent this out to the consultants. Is there really the need for all these consultants? I mean, is there not enough data available within, or expertise, I guess?
I love your questions.
That, not everything, I mean,
The
maybe
answer
there
isn't
is.
no, and here's why. The actual, I'm going to look back at the last 4 years.
Okay,
We have created new plans. We have updated and overhauled existing plans in such a manner that how do you this, how do you that. We have taken plans that used to be available online via basically PDF, and now they're integrated into a really convenient, I mean, there's a lot of applause that needs to go to the city for how we've done a better job shifting with technology than most of the communities around. So you can get in, you can click into the code and it references these things, whereas you used to kind of have to scroll through a PDF, or
Right.
some of us all had our notepads with all our yellow stickies sticking out of there.
All right.
And so they've done, oh boy, where was I going with that? So the act of, once you decide how you're going to change the code, being able to really tie these pieces where they referenced each other, the manpower and the expertise of being able to sort those out and get it done, that really is consuming and taxing. And despite the cost of these consultants, the longer term costs, and we live in the state of Colorado, right? So anytime you hire an employee, you are not just, you don't have a face value expenditure, right?
You've got all
There's a
the
whole lot.
benefits and whatnot.
Yeah, so there's a manpower thing there. The weight we give the consultants the answer is no. Because what's happening is, what I've observed is that here during that period, the consultants were king. I mean, the staff would get to come in, and if they tweaked it, great. But if you looked at the consultants versus stakeholder groups, consultants were right despite anything stakeholders said. That's been identified, that's been noticed. I'm comfortable saying I don't see our existing staff really clamoring to go down that road again. I think they've heard the feedback, and there will be adjustment. I don't know what that adjustment will look like, but there'll be adjustment.
Well, perhaps the consultants need to work with the stakeholders as well. Pull them in when they're doing the consulting.
And I think certainly they're. You could stand up and say they did, right? The stakeholders, we would get presentations from the consultant. We'd get presentations, from the staff with consultant support. We'd get that, but it's what they do with the feedback. So it isn't there's no equal weighting, or I might even say balance. It's heavily outweighted. And a lot of the challenge and complaints when it was all said and done is that the stakeholder group thought we had good conversations, thought we had identified collaboratively some directions that we were going, and then the final codes and final documents weren't available but a week or two before the hearing. And then when they got conveyed even in the hearing, it was a whoop.
We didn't say that.
Oh,
wait, what?
Yeah. So somewhere in there was. It wasn't that collaborative. So that's an improvement that we can learn from, right? Not a wholehearted, do we get rid of the consultants? But it is bleeding over.
See, that's me. Yes. Okay, you messed up. Chop off your fingers.
And I look at down the road in the future, and very, very near future, where we won't need the consultants at all, because we have AI. And AI is becoming such a powerful tool that you can plug anything into it and get your figures out. You don't need a consultant to do it.
Well, what'll be great about that, and I'm sure there's people cringing anytime you bring up AI in any conversation. There's fear, there's embracing, but here's the thing, AI will be such an inexpensive contributor to alternatives.
Right.
At any point, somebody that comes out and says this is now gospel, you'll have this thing super easy to go, I need you to be able to dismiss this. Right.
Exactly.
Like I have this other opinion.
Yes.
How do we balance these two things together? And it'll be an accountability tool.
There you go.
There you go.
And I think that's that's going to be the powerhouse for city planning, as something like that.
Yeah. Well, so one.
I was going to just ask you on your attorney, where are you getting your money to hire the second opinion? Because we have.
You asked me what can people do.
Yes.
Right.
They can volunteer their time as attorneys. What?
No. They can contribute funds to these groups, right?
Open up your pocket.
Yeah, I mean, you can join whether it be HBA, JARA. I'm going to throw the chamber in there. I don't. They don't really. Well, no, I think they would contribute. And then there's a number of other organizations that really kind of came up in recent years, kind of saying, "Hey, look, we want to establish as nonprofits to help support efforts towards affordable housing." Or, and quite frankly, some of them are, we have to support efforts towards getting in front of this regulatory onslaught, right? So just being able to reduce regulations that are coming or stand in their way, or modify and improve existing regulations for the sake of affordable housing. So there are these groups out there as well, and I don't have a list from off the top of my head, but I think that's something you guys could probably round up and share with listeners. But that would be huge, because we have that when we do the big plan updates, because there's such a heavy lift. It's hard to see a scenario where you wouldn't have a consultant involved at some level. But we still have as well an effort with our existing staff, where. So just the other day, I was in a meeting where we were presenting something from the Housing Affordability Task Force, and staff was there as a participant. I mean, it was not adversarial at all, but it was but how, when we write our reports, like, we need something more to help us support what you're saying. Are they? And they asked straight, and they really leaned in on this a couple of times. Can you show us any other cities or towns that are doing this, that are doing what you say you want? And I stopped and I said, oh my God, hey, can we pause? This is such a great opportunity. Can we pause our content, our topic, and can we now just right here talk about how, look what just happened. Let's put this out on the table, and we'll come back, we'll digest it and come back to it. But let's put it out on the table that you just had representatives from a group of decades long, in many cases, local and regional subject matter experts who have endured the policy, who are providing housing, who have managed the regulatory things, and they're from the nonprofit, and you have them coming in and saying, hey, this is a way that we can improve cost of housing. And your reaction was, I need more weight.
Has it ever been done before?
I need to make it credible. Is there another town or city?
No.
So so now I'm going to switch out of the, isn't this great because we can highlight this, so now we can improve it, and I'll give some of my more of opinion where it's like, can you name me another town or community that's in Colorado or something similar that has tackled their housing affordability crisis? If we keep doing it the way they're doing it, we're going to end up in the same pitfalls.
Exactly.
This is madness, right?
Exactly.
Moreover, we talk about it all the time. Western slope, front slope, right? Front range, and then mountain towns.
They're different.
They're
all
so different.
And every community
Just because they're
is
in the
different.
same state, it's like saying that well, California is the same as Wyoming because it's in the same country.
Or the same as us because it grows grapes. Hello, what?
Yeah. So, it was a really neat, I have no idea if it resonated with those on the other side of the table or not, but these are the things that I'm seeing where that didn't trigger like tension in the room when we had that conversation.
It didn't.
No, it didn't progress the conversation in a way where I walked out of it just like pitter patter, but that's different now. Right? So there is some culture shift happening. There is an openness, and what's another thing that's coming out of that's great is that staff's able to, because they're communicating more openly and effectively and not feeling like they have to go through just a channel, right? They can talk. Is you're starting to hear things like, I hear you, right? And that may even be a good idea, but on the other hand, you'd be blown away at how many calls we get going, I can't believe you're letting somebody build a subdivision right there. And it's really genuine outcry from some of those others in our community that are just, any new subdivision and development is just pillaging, right? It's not good. So, staff really does get jammed up in there. And that's where I for a while now, I really genuinely have been sympathetic because, especially under last council, all of that stuff that just got the blitzkrieg of we are going to stuff this new policy in here. Well, staff got charged with implementing it, and staff gets charged with enforcing it. So the decision makers got to go, make it so.
Right.
And staff got stuck with they got their shields and their blades, right?
Yeah.
you got to be
They're the ones that are bleeding on the sidelines,
to that
yeah.
because I definitely, as one of the best things about being an entrepreneur or doing my own projects is that I get to make the calls based on my end goals, the economic feasibility of it, and my values.
Right. Right.
When you're not doing that, when I am representing others or part of a committee or part of a board, whether it be, and I'm mostly talking about in projects, businesses, and whatnot, your role as a team player is to do things that you might not otherwise champion yourself.
Exactly.
There are some in staff that are in that same boat. So there's certainly some sympathy there, and the shift that's happening now with current council, with current administration, I'm really looking forward to how the change in legal leadership what that'll
That'll be
kind of
interesting
do,
to
because
see.
the legal department hasn't had the same. It hasn't been as illuminated as the other departments through these last processes,
Right.
and yet there's things there that have really presented some challenges and ultimately been the I'll say that they kind of create a stance or make a comment that again gets accepted as that thou shalt be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then the rest of us are left trying to work around that. And
It is kind of curious, though, that if you had the city say, this is our legal understanding, and you had Jajara say, come up with an attorney that said, I don't see it that way, who would have the ultimate say? Because I don't think there's anything that would cause the city to have to say, well, we have to look at this again because of what you said.
it is interesting, but I would say and I would say that, look, we don't, for the most part, we don't have people in positions of decision making right now, both at the staff levels and whatnot. We don't have people there who are incompetent, who
No, I
aren't
wouldn't
very,
say that.
very
All
good
right.
critical. In fact, I would applaud them heavily for being very, very good critical thinkers, right? So whether it be council, whether it be city management, whether it be, because city attorney and city manager, those are not, one's not under the other.
No.
They are both
Both.
equally under council, right? So then as legal is shifting as well, and before, you now have, if they had alternatives to consider, and drop it down to the department
Okay.
heads
Okay.
and the stakeholders,
Okay,
think about the discussions it would have.
okay.
They would be good. They would be good.
I genuinely believe that through the discussions of these smart people, that you would find, maybe not balance,
Common ground.
but it's, in statistics, it's called it's the standard deviation,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that is a process of eliminating being too heavily weighted and eliminating
The
these
extremes.
outliers out there, right? And that's what alternatives do, is they provide that blend, that opportunity to blend, or at the very least, it makes the decision makers so very aware of the contrast that now you can better understand the consequences down the road.
Okay.
So it's really huge, and not only is it bizarre to think about in that way, but the reason I remain optimistic, especially going forward with some new leadership, including in legal, is that this was so raw to me. I'm trying to make sure that I temper my comments, but I couldn't understand how for years Miss Shelley DeConish was an assistant city attorney, and when she was there, when she came up with a legal opinion and an assessment and whatnot, that's it. It was golden. The city recognized it. Well, Shelley has gone to the private sector, and she has been employed by land developers and builders and even some of these stakeholders to hey, can you give an opinion on this? And in some cases she has. And they've been sent to the city. And they have been utterly and immediately dismissed.
Oh,
Now, just to make sure that's not, I told you it was raw,
Yeah.
right?
right.
If it wasn't utterly and totally dismissed, they never influenced any adjustment or change at all,
Oh, okay.
right?
Okay, yes.
But it also never really, it wasn't part of looking at both of them. It was always you had to submit it to the city legal. They would decide whether or not they gave it merit. And now the information that goes to council or otherwise, it might include that, hey, this was presented, but we say this.
Yeah.
And the culture has been that,
Yeah.
well, if you say that, then that's where the city has landed. And I've seen that on planning. We defer to legal. We used to do it a whole lot, where it's like, okay, like, what options do we have here? How do we make sure we're doing this right? And if a legal gave an opinion, you're
was
pretty
law.
nervous about going against legal,
Right.
not knowing how that now changes your legal exposure, right? Have you now become arbitrary and capricious, or all of these other things that start to peel away any immunity about the decisions that you have?
Right.
Now, hear me say, like, that might be a perceived fear, not a real fear, but it resulted in, if legal right there in the middle of a hearing said this is it, what are we going to challenge
End
that?
of discussion.
Kind of, right? And so, and that's, I don't know, is that the way it is? Is that appropriate? I don't know. But now you funnel that up to city council decision making too. What a bizarre thing to wrap your head around, right? Somebody that got to say, yep, this is it, and then the moment she's not in that department anymore,
It's not considered.
yeah.
Interesting.
So again, it really creates some neat optimism that if you can bring a more imposing, or maybe a more third-party detached, right, kind of the way these consultants are supposed to be as well, and bring in alternative opinions, can it do harm?
No,
No.
no.
Do I think it's worth the money and the funding?
Yes.
I do.
Yes.
In my experience and my observations, I really do. And so
Well, and I think our
that's what
general
people can do.
populace thinks the same way, that there should be more than one way to skin the cat. It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
More options.
let me choose.
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been, since we're going on over an hour, you're so smooth. But do you have anything else you want to ask Bruce?
I don't.
or-
I think he's covered everything that
Yeah.
I was thinking
and
about.
we know where you live. And we
Yes.
know
Oh,
where
boy.
We
live,
have your
so-
number.
Oh, boy.
So we would love to have you on again. When
Sure. I enjoy, I think we've kind of touched base a few times,
Yep.
and
We have.
and it was, I was a little bit, it was like, man, I want to, but let's get more informed, because I hope, and I'll take any feedback as well, that I gain a great deal of value, and conversations that I have are so much better because of the various perspectives that I see it from in my
Right.
roles.
Right.
And so I hope when I come on here, I do a good job of sharing those different perspectives with minimizing my personal beliefs on it, although I know they sneak in there once in a while. So happy to do it again here in a bit, because we are making progress. There are
and
things.
that's exciting.
There are
that
things in the
happening.
works.
We're glad.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well,
Okay.
you've been watching Mesa County Compass. This is the facts as we know them, the truth as we see it. You decide.
Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.